Okay, so our plan is just to plant ourselves on the Dark Lord's doorstep without actually knowing who the Dragon Reborn is.
Yep.
So that means the rest of us who aren't the dragon will just die?
Did you not pick up last episode when I tried to lie to you guys and I literally couldn't say you were going to be fine? Yeah, you guys are totally fucked.
And you expect us to go along with the suicide mission. Matt bailed. Maybe we should too.
Come on, it'll be fun. Just think of it as a Christmas field trip to the literal worst place on Earth. Have some candy, sign these release papers. I'm not responsible for any premature deaths, Dark Lord or otherwise. Merry Christmas!
Episode 7 of the Wheel of Time was the make or break episode of this season, at least for me. And I think they did a great job. If this episode had flopped or not done what it had to do, I think the show as a whole would have been reduced greatly in my eyes and not be the product that I had wished for in an adaptation of The Wheel of Time. Now I'm going to ask you guys to like and subscribe. I'd still love to hit 1,000 subscribers before the end of the year. Come on, spread some Christmas cheer or Hanukkah or Beltane, whatever you celebrate, help a brother out. Well, kicking off the episode, we have another badass cold opening. Why are all the cold openings better than the one they gave us to start the entire show? But we kick off with who we later find out is Rand's mom, kicking the shit out of some Ilian soldiers. Now, I was really excited to see how they would portray the Aiel and how built different they are. And I think they definitely succeeded. And I'm even more excited to see what they do with non-pregnant characters in combat. These are fighters of unmatched skill that very few in the Westlands can compete in one-on-one or one-on-three combat. I love the way they did it. There were some moments in the choreography where it's like dramatic pause, but overall I thought the fighting and the way it flowed worked really well, and I'd love to see these 7-foot gingers just kick ass later on in the series. But eventually Rand's mom finally runs out of energy after being stabbed by one of the Ilian soldiers, and she collapses onto this stone, and another soldier comes up and points a sword at her, who we later find out is Tam, who is Rand's surrogate father. What I love about the scene is how visceral and bloody it is. It is realistic in a way that getting stabbed actually produces this effect. Now, I just watched the new Spider-Man, and no spoilers, but somebody gets stabbed and like you don't even see a wound. You're just like, I guess they're stabbed. I really like how it is pretty realistic in the way that these weapons function. Adds another sense of danger to the world. Something I hope book readers don't get mad about is the veil not being up. Yes, they talked about it earlier in the season, but just as I was talking about Spider-Man, you can't really emote through a mask, and actors have to act. So that is something that I'm willing to concede, even though it is taking a bit of the lore away. Also, she was just pregnant and she got attacked. Like, yeah, you're supposed to pull it up, but she's got a lot on her mind. I'm willing to forgive that, and I don't think it matters that much. But in later seasons, maybe make it an effort to be like, okay, yeah, they're pulling up their veils before they go to battle, unless it's dire circumstances. We then jump into the ways where we awkwardly left off last episode, and the Emmons Field 4 now discuss what exactly is going on with Matt, and Perrin's being pragmatic, Nynaeve is trying to be the leader, and Rand's defending his friend, and be like, why aren't we going back from? This is the character development that I wanted to see and was definitely lacking in this first season. I think they did go wrong there, as I discussed in the last episode and have mentioned previously. I think this is good, but it is a little too late overall, and I think they missed a step. Yes, there's plenty of material in the future to develop these people, but this is a first impression, and as you know, first impressions are always the most important. But we also get Moraine talking about why she's fine with leaving Matt behind, about this inherent darkness, and she wouldn't bring him close to the Dark Lord because the dragon can fall either way. He can save the world or destroy it with a Dark One. And I thought this was a fine enough excuse, especially in light of what happened with the actor. And there's later bits in the episode that you can definitely tell Matt was supposed to be a part of, and maybe even be the main source of conflict. And the way that they managed to repiece the story back together leaves me more impressed than disappointed with what is there. Now, the look of the ways is fine enough. I think they captured the atmosphere and the darkness well enough, but I wish they'd emphasized how this used to be something great. I had always imagined it as these sweeping, expansive expansive bridges between islands that had been destroyed by decay and corruption over time. And the way that they did it in the show was good enough, but I really wish they'd captured that this used to be something greater. Another nitpick I have about the ways, and later on when Moiraine and Rand go into the Blight, is that there's no horses, and that makes the world feel a lot smaller, and the distances between things not matter as much. Yeah, it's a very tiny thing, and it leads to more character interactions as they walk, but it makes the world feel a little bit more clustered than it actually is. Something that I found really funny was when they were talking about falling to death in the ways, and Loyal's like, oh yes, there's very much worse ways to die. And like, what the fuck do you mean? And they just move on as Perrin spots something in the distance. This was a nice little hint for powers that Perrin may have in the future, but he had spotted the guide stone of the ways, and it has been scratched into oblivion. And now they don't really know where they're going and have to pause for the night while Loyal tries to decipher it. While everybody's settling down for the night, Rand and Egwene cuddle up and Perrin watches on. And what I first assumed was just grief of him losing Layla and not having somebody there, as even Nynaeve and Lan are having their little chemistry moments and he is just completely alone. But we later figure out it's because he kind of has a crush on Egwene, of which I'm not really a fan of. I don't think that was necessary in any way, and kind of dilutes the friendship that Rand and him have. It's not a totally big deal and it's kind of over with after this episode, but in the moment I was like, I don't really like that. As they are resting, Egwene is awakened by a whistle, and you see Padon Fane in a flash of lightning, and a troll hops in. And in this moment, you think Egwene channels him off the edge, drawing in Machin Shin and the intention of the Dark Cloud. But it was actually Rand. And I'm curious to see on a rewatch, can you see the corruption on the power, or is it only there when Rand thinks about it later on? Something I don't think they made clear enough was that Machin Shin is not a friend of the Dark or the Trollocs or Fane. It is its own entity and had killed the Waith. It seemed like it had been commanded by Padon Fane, or maybe came with the Trollocs, and it was not made totally clear that it was attracted to the channeling. But Moiraine makes the executive decision to head for the Fal Dara gate, as it is closer than the one in the Eye of the World. And as they get to the gate and Moiraine starts channeling, Machin Shin, the black wind hits, and everybody's deepest fears and insecurities are brought forth in their mind. Rand hears that Egwene left him once, and she does not love him as much as he does her, and something we do not hear in this moment, but that he has always known he has been the dragon. And Perrin is told he killed Layla on purpose because he truly loves another woman. And Moiraine battles her insecurity of sacrificing these kids just with the slight chance of defeating the Dark One. And this is in contrast to what she says of, I will sacrifice 4 of you just if one of you can defeat the Dark One. She has these conflictions. She's just not a cold-hearted bastard that will do this simply because it's her mission. And Machin Shin brings out this anguish within her. But the savior of the day turns out to be Nynaeve, as her anger is triggered and therefore her channeling by the wind telling her that she cannot protect those that she loves. She cannot heal, she cannot save. And that really is the core basis of Nynaeve's character. Now, I don't really like her being the one to keep the cool head in the situation versus Moiraine. I wish she had had this moment, but framed in a different way to where Moiraine didn't seem so useless, as she is so trained in the Aes Sedai ways, and she should be able to stay calm even with her worst fears bombarding her. But once outside of the ways, everybody is totally fucked up, and Rand is crying. And now, before this episode, I was not totally sure if this actor could play off all the roles that Rand has to play himself. And after this, in his performance that he gives, I have confidence in him being the dragon, being Rand al'Thor, and I think he'll do a great job, especially when Egwene taps his shoulder and he flinches, and you can see the single tear dripping down his cheek as he thinks over what he heard about Egwene, how she will not love him as much as he will ever love her. And this is hitting so hard in all of their psyches. But they move on to Fal Dara, where we see our boy Uno. He's the short guy with one eye. He's a pretty cool side character and shows up through all the books and is a pretty fun guy to be around. They then go meet with Lord Aglamar, and he is kind of being salty. He's like, hey, White Tower, stay out of my business. I've been doing this for years. I know what I'm doing. And Moraine's like, listen, bitch, I'm not here to advise or take over. I'm just letting you know your back door's wide open and you should probably cover it or else we're all fucked. He does apologize to Moiraine and realizes his mistake, but this does show that the mistrust of the White Tower and the fear that they will just come in and take over your kingdom does exist, even in the most anti-Shadow kingdoms like the Borderlands. But then we get Moiraine talking to the sister of Lord Aglamar, and she went to the White Tower, but was not powerful enough to become an actual sister, which I'm assuming is the sign of the ring without the actual color within it. But she gives information about Min. Min, who appears much earlier on in the books, and as you see later on, is very important in terms of prophecy and figuring out the future of our main characters. Moiraine then tells the sister to contact the Red Aja and have Mat captured or detained in Tar Valon, and this is just something Moiraine would not do. Whether it's petty politics or her own reasoning, she would not enlist the help of the Red Aja. I fundamentally disagree with this decision, and it doesn't make sense at all. Why wouldn't she just say the tower in general, or even just the Blue Aja? I don't know, didn't like it, but in the streets of Fal Dara, Perrin spots Padan Fain yet again. My boy is just snooping around, and I definitely think he would have had a bigger role to play in this episode if the Mat actor had not left. The later confrontation scene between the four of them, I think that would have been Mat versus Padan Fain, but that's just my theorizing. While Moiraine is grabbing drinks, the Emond's Field kids banter back and forth, and these character interactions are what the show needed earlier on. I love this stuff. It's a little too late at this point, not in the grand scheme of things, but just in the season. But oh my god, it is so good to have and see the way that they bounce off of each other and the way that their strong personalities react to certain things. But Moiraine is not talking to just a bartender. She is actually talking to the aforementioned Min, and Min can see visions. I was kind of disappointed with how the visions were displayed. It showed them like as ghosts of themselves. The way I imagined it were like symbols above their heads that really only Min could infer the meaning of, but anybody can kind of see what this means and decipher it. But there's a bunch of foreshadowing in what she said that neither one of the kids can assuredly be the dragon, leaving Moiraine shit out of luck yet again. Min gives Moiraine one last vision about herself and about how the Amyrlin will be her downfall. Now I think this hints towards that there is something more in the visions that the Amyrlin saw before and told Moiraine about, that going to the Eye of the World is not as cut and dry as it seems to be. So we will see where that leads, but I definitely think that there is something circumspect going on. Next, we have a scene with some great acting and display of character, especially from the Emond's Field 4, which should be 5, but there is shallow motivation and not a whole lot of depth to the conflict giving, which I do have a bit of a problem about, mostly revolving around Rand, Egwene, and Perrin, and the little weird love triangle that's going on. But to kick off the scene, Moiraine just straight up tells him, yeah, I'm gonna sacrifice you guys. We don't know who it is. It's not really a choice. You guys have to go to the Blight, and we need to get this shit done, or else the whole world's fucked. Nynaeve tries to stand up for them, saying this is our decision. You can't make this for us. And Rand's mistrust of the Aes Sedai grows. His suspicion is mounting. Egwene ends up calling out Nynaeve, saying, hey, your prejudice is getting in the way. And this really hits Nynaeve hard, as this same thing almost caused Mat to die. Her pride and prejudice got in her way of trusting the Aes Sedai to do something she could not at that very moment. They then start theorizing of what if Mat is the dragon, and Egwene's like, come on, Mat, really? Does he seem like the hero of ages? And everyone's like, hey, that's my fucking boy, don't you be saying that. And they start going at it. Rand is like, Mat leaving? You left me just the same. And Perrin jumps to her defense. Nynaeve butts in and only makes things worse, talking about them fighting over Egwene like she is something to claim, something to own. And Perrin and Rand, the death look between them, ooh, it is so good, but I don't like this conflict over Egwene in the first place. So it's like, yes, good acting and good character work for the people, but the conflict itself is stupid and totally unnecessary. The look on Perrin's face is so stricken and in pain, and the Machin Shin voice talking about loving another woman now makes sense. This scene was so good in acting and development for our Emond's Field kids, except it was over such a childish conflict. I wish we'd gotten more earlier on. I'm gonna have to drop my rating of episode 5 because I miscalculated how much time we would have to give to these kids, and that definitely took away from scenes I would have preferred to have over the warder thing, which I think would serve the same purpose in a later season. So I'm gonna drop that to a 7 out of 10 from a 9. We have another great character scene between Moiraine and and Lan as Moraine talks about her regrets. On the eve of her death, she's like, Lan, I'm sorry for really taking away your life. And Lan talks about how he didn't really have purpose or place in the world before meeting Moraine, which is kind of true with New Spring, but this does take away from like the hate and journey he has towards the Blight and avenging Malkier, even if it is just himself that rides into the Blight to die. There was a bit of background that was kind of cut in favor of making him more reliant on Moraine, which I'm a little bit iffy on, but overall I thought it was fine as they are changing the Lan character to be more personable. Lan then goes and visits some of his Malkieri brethren, of which a lot of people will confuse for his family, but they are not, as it is explained later that this used to be a king's bodyguard that saved him. It does come off with a real family vibe. But Nynaeve follows him, and then Lan just fucking teleports out of the building behind her. It was a really weird edit, but I kind of liked it because it was like, I'm here, and now I'm here. Why the fuck are you spying on me, Nynaeve? Something I'm a bit iffy on is how accepting of the Daishan title Lan is, as in the books he is against being called a king as there is no kingdom to exist. Yes, it is king in waiting, but overall I think he should be a bit more I am no king at this point in time. But after having dinner with one of the men that essentially saved his life, him and Nynaeve walk back to their rooms and have the most awkward goodbye scene as they just sit there and stare at each other with the weirdest sexual tension before Lan going in and damn, my boy is cut the fuck up on his back. And Nynaeve enters the room and she's like, you want me to go? And he's like, nah. We getting it on. And the relationship has finally started. One of the better relationships in the books, as Robert Jordan isn't exactly known for his romantic writing, but this one is done pretty well throughout the whole entire series, and I'm looking forward to seeing what more they do with this in the future. Then we cut to Rand missing his shots on the target. This hints at what happens later as he is so unfocused, knowing that he is the dragon but not wanting to confirm it in his head. He does not have the calm he needs to enter the void and hit the target in the bullseye, as we see later on. I'm hoping we get a void explanation at least next episode or beginning of next season. Another great scene of the Emmons Field kids' chemistry of when Egwene says, I waited in my room for hours for you to come and apologize. And Rand is like, you know, I found from experience, you're not ready to talk until you come and see me. So now I will apologize now. And this is the character interactions. This makes them seem like they've known each other for their whole entire lives. And we needed more of it earlier, as I've said over and over again. It is so good when we do get it. They do reconcile, and Rand promises to be her warder and support her in her journey to become Aes Sedai. He is really the first one of their original group that's been like, look, go do this. Nynaeve has been against it. Matt's been against it. Perrin, he's kind of indifferent. He's been having his own problems. But Rand is like, I may mistrust them, but I support you in what you strive to do, and I will be your warder. It's also so great to hear Egwene talk about, no matter what, I will stand by your side, Rand. And the foreshadowing for what's to come is so great. The ideological differences that will occur and the trust that they have being tested. I can't wait to see it on the screen. We then cut back to Nynaeve and Lan, and Nynaeve is getting ready to leave, and we get an explanation of Daishar and Malkier. It did not hit extremely hard, but I thought it was well and sufficient in the way that Lan talked about it. I would have loved to see more grief on his face as he talks about the Seven Towers falling and how his country was essentially abandoned to the Blight. It is such a sad story, and I think they could have definitely played it for a bigger emotional reaction than they did, but overall it was pretty good. They also discussed that Moraine does not own him, and Lan brings up a very good point that it is a love and it is a bond that they have, to where just as Nynaeve is attached to the Emmons Field kids, he is attached to Moraine. That is one of the best analogies that I've heard for the connection between a warder and an Aes Sedai, and the way Nynaeve feels about her responsibility to protect these kids. This scene was pretty solid, and I just love the character work. The moments between these actors work so well, and I hope they focus on that a lot more in the future. But the next sequence is probably my favorite of the whole episode, and one of my favorites of the show, of Rand realizing he's the dragon and accepting it, putting these clues together on this sleepless night after hooking up with Egwene. He goes out to shoot arrows yet again, and these visions are flashing. We see him carrying Tam through that night, that horrible night that kicked off the season, and Tam mutters about how he found him on Dragonmount and how he's adopted. Now I wish this had been stretched out a little bit longer and given more context, because it was very quick and hard to pick up on about what exactly Tam said. But Rand starts to accept it was him that channeled in the ways. It was him that channeled to break down that door, that he is the dragon. And as he accepts this and calms his mind, he starts hitting the bullseye. This is him realizing his destiny and letting fate be accepted. He is calm. He does not have the nervousness he did before, allowing him to access the void, which I feel we'll get touched on later, and bullseye after bullseye. And then he goes and sees Min, and Min do be Min. The way she acts was great. She is older, as is demonstrated when she talks about seeing Tam in the streets of Tar Valon as a little girl. And Rand's aura of him being a ta'veren is so powerful that it activated her ability essentially. And she has known that Rand was the dragon, and this is the final piece Rand needed to accept his fate in full and do what needs to be done. Be his core character and save people, of which he then goes to Moraine and they travel to the Blight. We jump to Egwene in Nynaeve's room being like, the bed's still made. Nynaeve, you've been fucking, haven't you? And Nynaeve's like, yeah. And then Perrin awkwardly walks in, especially awkwardly after what had happened last night, and he's definitely ashamed over what he said and what he did. But they've all made up their minds to venture into the Blight in hopes of saving the world from the Dark One. But then there's a knock on the door and Lan's like, my bondsman mass? Where's Rand? What the hell's going on? They're like, I thought Rand was with you. I thought Rand was with you. What the fuck is happening? And they're like, oh shit. He's the dragon, and him and Moraine fucked off to the Blight. Now, the look of the Blight is great. I love the grossness of it, but yet again, the horse thing, there's no way horses get through that, and them walking through that makes it feel like the Dark Lord or the Eye of the World is so much closer to civilization than it should be, and the distances of the world are not as big as they need to be to expand the vastness of this universe. Overall, as I said before, this episode was the make or break point, and I think they succeeded. They implemented the elements we had wanted to see earlier in the series. Yes, it is a bit late, but better late than never. And they showed us they can work with these characters and give us the moments we crave so much. I'm giving this a solid 8 out of 10. And definitely saved the season after the little bit of a rocky downhill slope they had. I'm very curious to see how they do the finale of Eye of the World. It is something that I will not mind them changing significantly. Honestly, just take free reign. Don't fuck up anything that's really key to the books, but you can change up this plot point as much as you want to a certain extent. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this review. I'll be back with another one soon. Thanks, guys.